this is more about IT providers. Maybe you don't know about it. Jems as the portal. And in a very nutshell, this is the place to find all resources for Jems. Let me just put it on the chat because you might need the link. Personally, I think this is the only link you need to bookmark. I'm talking for the IT providers about Jems because this portal will contain everything you need. So about is not a big deal. You can find the demos. These are a live instance of Jems. So you can see live, try by yourself and compare with your installation. You know, we have live instance, one for the released package, official version, and another one with the latest development. Means it's every time we have some development on Jems in the repository, it's put live in this instance. This is mainly used for sprint reviews, where the users give feedback about the latest developments. Not at all to be used for production. This kind of because you might see half of half functionalities there, or no documentation, things like that. This is only for the purpose of the sprint review, or for the purpose that users or IT providers as well can see what is coming in the future. Yeah, about support itself, we have an help desk. You can also access here. We have documentation. By the way, if you are an IT provider, you don't have access to the help desk, please ask by your program access to it, because this is the place where you open tickets. Documentation, this is quite useful. I believe for today as well, it's important that you are familiar with our manual. Especially today, we will focus on technical manual, right? You will see things like related with installation, parameters for how to set up service, all these things. I believe that you might be familiar already. If not, please, this is the page for you. We even have all the command line for Jems that you need for booting. Yeah, of course, interact communities. This is the place, and this might be important for IT providers in the sense that this is the place. Anytime we have a release, we put a post there, or not only about official release, but maybe a hotfix about some security patch or something. And this is still the channel we use to communicate with our stakeholders. I believe the program should be the ones responsible to get this information and trigger the IT provider to make the update. But all the process is up to programs, how they work together. Of course, at the last, we have download the section where you can just go to our GitLab to access the official Jems release. Also access to the source code, the typical thing about repositories. So actually, I would start here because the first session is about installing Jems from the Interact official release. And so you might get here. So we have something called releases in the repository. Right now we have two files. We have the package v4 and we have the package v5. By the way, if you are coming from EMS, let me explain you that in EMS, there was a mandatory sequence of installations, right? If you were in version 3, you could not install version 5. You would need to install version 4 and then version 5. That does not happen with Jems. If you are version 3, you could immediately install version 5 because it applies automatically to all scripts in the between. So this is why we have some disclaimer here. Always download the latest package. Yeah, so this is what we are going to do actually today. I will give the floor to Andre. You will just perform the installation of the package v501 in a brand new machine, I believe, right, Andre? And yeah, so, oh, by the way, inside of the package, just like here it says, you will find the jar. I mean, I think Andre can actually start by that, by unzipping the zip and show the content of it. So, Andre, I give the floor to you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Good. So what I would like to firstly start with is just make it clear what we are doing as a company. So what we are doing as a result of our work is this Java application, which is packed to this jar file. So the only requirement to run this is to have a Java. So what we will do is take a brand new Linux machine, install Java, and then run this jar file, because that's actually everything you would need. So my task this morning is to show you how easy it is. And Jose already shown that there in the interact you can have those releases. So those jar files are already prepared for you. But there is also this possibility to create those jar files yourself from the source code, which will be covered later, because for that we use other tools. So just to make this clear, and now I will share this second screen. So yeah, let's go to this releases page where we have releases and where we can download this latest version of Jems. So yeah, maybe not delete, but rather download. Okay, and let's go in there, or let's extract this. But okay, so this is what I was talking about. This is the jar file. That's the main application thing that you will run and you will get from Interact or from us. And our task now will be to run this in this Linux environment. So what I did is I just prepared the brand new Ubuntu machine. I just increased a little bit the memory. So yeah, let's start this, and we will see what else we would need. Okay, so that was faster than I was expecting. Yeah, okay, so here we are. This is our brand new machine. And so first thing we need to check if we have Java and which version it is. So what we can do is just call Java version to see, but yeah, we see that we do not have Java. But as Jose said, always download the latest, so we can install the latest. But here I would only recommend you to go with Java 11 or 17, because those are a long time supported version. So what we can do is simply install Java. It doesn't matter actually how you will do it. It's the requirement to run it. So if we have Java, we are so far good. So let's install Java to this machine. That might take some time, but should be good. Okay, so we can reject Java minus version, and we are now on Java 17, which is quite okay. Now let me create a directory for this workshop where we can store some files. So I will create a workshop directory, and what I now need is to have this jar file. So what I can do is actually just copy that file that we downloaded from Interact. So I can open my my command line here in my for now Windows machine. Just go to downloads, where I think I downloaded this package. It's called Jems. Yeah, Jems.v5. Okay, and yeah, here we have the Jems server jar. So let me now copy this file to my Linux or to my Ubuntu. That we can do with secure copy command. We will just take the Jems server jar and put it to my username and the IP address, which I do not know. So I need to go here and do if config. Okay, if config is not installed, never mind. So we can also solve that quickly. No. Install NetTools. So my address is now 9 to basically this one. So let me copy, paste, and we will copy it to my home username / workshop. Yes. Password. Okay, that was fast. So I am now in workshop directory, not yet. Okay, workshop, and if I now list files, I now have the Jems server jar, which I need. Okay, so now we are quite good. Now we have Java, we have a jar file, so we can do Java -jar, which is the command how you will run it, and Jems server jar, which is the jar file that we want to run. And this is already the log that the server is already starting. So yeah, that was quite fast. That's all actually that we need. But problem is now, then we do not have the other components which are needed to start the server. So we, if we go to the documentation or to the README file, we will know that to successfully start the server, we need some components like database, MariaDB. Then we need the MinIO, which is a file system where users can upload files and so on. And Elasticsearch is also a database where you can store and easily search audit logs. So to still be able to start the server, we need to provide this application with those 3 components, or actually the only mandatory is the database. But I guess we all need or would need full functionality. So let's go to with those all 3. What we do in our development stage, or what you can also do, is, or the easy way to satisfy this is to use Docker. So what we can do, just create a Docker containers with those 3, and then connect to it from this application. So I would also do the same here. So let me check if in Docker there are some running containers, but okay, we do not have Docker. So we need to install Docker. That's not a problem. We can just call this command and install Docker. Yes, let's continue. And meanwhile, this is installing. We can also check what's the next thing in this downloaded release, and that's this Docker Compose file. I hope you are all familiar with, just in case not, in this Docker Compose file, you can also open it. It's what is there is a stored configuration for those 3 containers that we actually need. And it's this configuration that we used in development stage. But I will get back to it a little bit later. But simply what we can do is just take those 3 and deploy or run them in Docker, which is what we will now aim to do. So we will have MariaDB of this version, MinIO of this version, and Elasticsearch of also some other version, plus some default ports and so on. But we will get back to it. It's not an important right now. What we just need to do is satisfy the server, so he will get those 3. Okay, so we now have Docker. We can check once again if it's working. So okay, nothing is running. The Docker PS command is listing running containers, so nothing is running. Let me now take this Docker Compose file as well to this Ubuntu. So I will just quickly switch back to my command line on my system and use the same command. Just I will now copy not the Jems server jar, but I will copy Docker Compose file. I hope I'm not fast, but I think those things I'm doing are actually quite easy. So, okay, password. Good. Now, if I list files, just to recheck, now we have the Docker Compose file here. We can also check the content, but it's basically what I have shown. Those things are commented out because we used some other things as well for development, but it's not that important. But we have those main three. So Elastic called Audit Database, MinIO called Jems MinIO, and database called Jems Database.
Andre, we have a question in the chat. Christoph Eck is asking if the password and usernames can be changed.
Password and username of what?
So in this Docker, I believe it's about this Docker. We have passwords there, right? Or oh no, sorry, it's not specified here. So in okay, I believe Christoph saw from the manual. We have the default passwords for MiniIO and so on.
Yeah, sure. I will get
later.
to it.
Okay.
No problem. Stay tuned. Okay, so there is a command to run this setup of this Docker Compose at once. So what we can do is, I think it's Docker Compose up. -d means it's detached, but not sure. And I think those Docker commands in Linux needs to be prefixed with sudo. Let's check if it will start. Okay, so it's not this one. It's then Docker Compose with dash. I think.
Yeah, with dash. I just wanted to say. But it could be that you have to install it, Docker Compose IO also.
Okay, never mind. That's still good. Yeah, so we need to install the Docker Compose to be able to compose. So let's install. That is also quick. Okay, there is some problem. So let me kill this bash. Let me try again. Okay, there is some log file blocking my installation. Never mind, we can just quickly reboot and that should solve the problem. Yeah, we installed a bunch of stuff, so maybe it's good to reboot sometimes. Okay. Yeah, but meanwhile, maybe we can answer the question of changing those things. Yeah, what you will see, I do not want to talk in forward or in advance what I will do, but those things that I will now start will then make server capable of starting automatically just because those passwords and values are the same. So those default passwords from our configurations are same as these ones in Docker Compose file, but of course you can set them manually or override them. Okay, so I should be back with this machine. Okay, and let me try to again install this Docker Compose. Good, that looks much better. Okay, just I need to go to the correct directory. Okay, yeah. So I will go to workshop where I have those files. Okay, and now I can run this Docker Compose. So Docker Compose up -d. -d should be just a flag to be detached. So when the command is successful, I do not have to have the bash open. But let's see. Okay, what now? Now the first time we do this, it will take some time just because we need to pull those images. So we do not have the MariaDB image for Docker and so on and so on. So yeah, this time it will take a few minutes, but I think it's still fine.
Yeah, so maybe I can just give, I believe everyone in IT knows about Docker. But just with the feedback that I believe that some other data centers don't work with containers, and still they could do it manually, install system by system, sudo install, yum install whatever, MariaDB, MiniIO, all things manually. But we like automation. Docker is lovely, and it will automatically install everything for us. That's what just Andre did here. So just to give that.
Yeah, also that's what I basically meant. So it boils down to the configuration. So if you have your servers then completely independently installed, that's also completely fine. So you can have your MariaDB server extra somewhere, but you will then always have to define the IPs and the permissions and so on. So that's the thing that Docker makes pretty much easier, because you will have it basically automatically configured.
Okay. So our Docker compose should be fine. If I now just recheck the running containers, now we see it's quite, I do not have that white screen, but it's 3 containers. You see the first one is the audit database, then it's the Jems database. So it's MariaDB, Elasticsearch, and MiniIO. So now we should have everything that we need. And if I again do java -jar, so the command to run the application itself and specify the server or the jar file, now we should be able to start the application successfully. So let's see, it also takes some minute to start our services, but let's see.
Okay, so maybe just another issue, if we run, correct me, Andre, if I'm wrong, but so if we run just like that, straight forward Jems server, it means that all the parameters will be the default values, right?
Yeah. But for now, we just want to have that running, and then we can check the other configuration details. Okay, that looks like it's already one good way. And to check the system itself, we can either go to the browser, or we can also do that actually from my machine, maybe. So if I go here and check the IP address, which is 96.129, and then on default port 8080, the application should be running actually, but that I'm not sure. But yeah, it's here. So yeah, the Jems is alive. We did everything we needed. Yeah, we can do the same here in Ubuntu from the browser, but I have it in my local machine now, so it's also fine. So yeah, we are here. The application is running. We can test the login with the default credentials, but this application is ready to go actually. We can check the Elastic Audit Log. So yeah, those audits actually in system audit, those audit logs are coming from Elasticsearch. If we see them, that means Elasticsearch works as well. Or we can also then test file management or other stuff, but everything should be fine. What we can quickly do as a demonstration is create a new account. There is this register, but maybe it's now not enabled. Okay, never mind.
So let me just put it. So you managed to run straight away Jems. That means that you didn't pass any configuration regarding, the add-ons, the plugins. So it means that we can run Jems without plugins with no problem. I mean, of course, they will not be there, but sometimes people are expecting that there's an error if you run Jems and they don't detect plugins or whatsoever, but this does not happen. It looks like Jems can be run without any plugins though. So this is important. Why? Because you might be, as an admin, you have to understand that you still have to check, even if Jems is running, if the plugins are detected. okay? Because if you pass the wrong path and so on, and I'm talking about this because I got some tickets that people thought that by default Jems would not run if they don't detect the plugins, but it's not the case.
Yeah, okay. But here I would like to now maybe explain or mention at least two things. We can also kill the server, never mind. The first important thing is the default configuration file, which is in the source code. It's not part of the release, but it's interesting to know that something like that exists. So if I go to source code, and it's not now important where it is, but there is this application YAML file. This application YAML file is this default configuration that you are then overriding if you are changing some things here. So yeah, here we have a few things. For example, like where the min.io is or where the database is. If you go over them, it's usually self-explanatory, like a data source means the database. So here you have a URL where the database is connected. You can override it then with startup parameters or environment variables, which in my opinion is much more comfortable. But yeah, here I wanted to check because when I registered, okay, never mind. Yeah, so this is why we were able to start it without any changes, because for example, this min.io is configured to be by default on localhost 9000. If I go to Docker Compose file, which created this service, then in min.io I also specified the 9000 port. So that's why those things are running now without any changes. But I can also do those changes either by changing those startup parameters, which I'm not a huge fan, but I know it's possible, or it's for me, or what I would suggest to you is usually use those environment variables. So if I want to, for example, disable registration captcha or disable mail, I will just do something like export then the environment variable and then set the value to false, for example. Or then then I can do it globally and have those settings on one page. But of course I can do it with running the Java jar gem server and then override those parameters with something like minus d app dot captcha dot enabled and so on and so on and so on. But then usually you will end up with startup commands that are 30 lines long and it's not that readable, and then you are trying to see where the mistake is. So what I wanted to mention, it's also interesting to know that something like this file application YAML exists. Either it's even it's not part of the release, or maybe we could in future add it, but I might, okay, I will not put it anywhere, but there is this file, and I just wanted to make clear that that it exists. And the second thing I want to mention is, or also want to make it clear, is this Docker Compose file that is also part of this release. So that's the setup we used locally, which is very, very, I would say, simplified. Yeah, for example, this Elasticsearch, I will just deploy one instance or one node. Yeah, so it's type single node, or this min.io is also just one container and so on. But usually, if you want to deploy those things, or if I go to, for example, min.io Docker, so I will check the documentation for min.io. Yeah, there it is. That, for example, you can run it standalone on Docker, or you can run it distributed or not distributed. But usually there are things like for production, deploy always distributed. Yeah, which is then much more complex Docker Compose. There are examples like here, maybe not here, but here. Sorry. Yeah, like it's much bigger Docker Compose then, because it's then recommended to use some duplications and so on. But those are not things that we need to cover now, but I just wanted to make clear that this default Docker Compose file is rather used for having something quickly. But if you want to, you might be maybe interested in deploying it the other way around. For example, I can also check documentation for Elasticsearch for Docker. Install Elasticsearch with Docker maybe, and it's also worth to check it when doing this initial setup. Yeah, it's like if you're using the Docker images in production, there might be some setup that you might be interested in, but usually for development purposes you don't care that much. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know that there is sometimes worth it to just quickly recheck the documentation for those when you will be creating those production environments. And yeah.
Let me just interfere here a bit. Not about, in general, this Docker Compose file, it can be customized. We Interact have to provide some standard file that works, and this is what we do. But of course, you can always customize the Docker file, if you don't have access to certain ports or whatsoever. All IT providers are free to customize it, to change it accordingly to their requirements. But what I want to say, Andre, still about, you showed this YAML file, which is, I believe, a bit more developer mindset you went to directly to. But the way that Interact transmit this, it's based on the manual. So this is what we would recommend, is that they can see all the command line for Jems server, and I would recommend to use the command line. So environment variables, let's say that they have an issue. For instance, when you have more than one instance running in the same machine, you might have the same environment variable that is shared between both. And imagine that you have some specific port or so, you might get a conflict. So for that, we have and this is the recommendation, you will find in the manual. Maybe, Andre, you can share the manual of Jems. It's in our Jems portal. So it's in the chat. You'll find the link, Jems Interact. Oh, yes, you can go there. So technical manual. Yes, system configuration, installation instructions. Yeah, you can click in one of those. You scroll down all the way. So all the way, there's a tail still more. Yes, okay, it starts from here. We still see, okay, so you will find all these parameters that, so that the idea is that you should not go, I would not recommend you to use environment variables, but more the command line here. So you can do pretty much, you just have to come to the manual and see how you specify different things. That means you are specifying the server port, for instance, of Jems and things like that. I still recommend you to use these common parameters than the environment variables, for instance. Maybe, I don't know what is your plan right now, Andre, but I believe you are going to launch Jems with some of this configuration, right? In the console.
I still wanted to show one more thing, but I need to start the server again.
All right.
Which might be also interesting. And okay, it's not here. So Java minus Java server. Okay. There is also another interesting thing that should be also here in documentation. Yeah. And that is that there is also there are also some default service endpoints that you can use to monitor the application or get some info about it, which by default are on the same port, just plus 10,000. Okay, if it started, I will show you. So let me go here, but I would not go with incognito window. Okay, so here there should be application running. Okay, but if I change this and if I will go with port 10,000 plus and then slash actuator, then I get some info endpoints and health check endpoints that might be interesting for you if you will do some automatic deployments or just checking some state of other things. So for example, this info endpoint is also interesting if I want to know, for example, what was the last changes when it was built, what is the version, yeah, this is the time where the version was created, and such details you also are able to retrieve from the system itself. Then this health endpoint is also interesting for you if you want to check, for example, if I go to health, I will get some info about, for example, Elasticsearch, that it's up and running. The database is also up and running. Some disk space details. The overall system is also up. So yeah, so those are yeah, maybe metrics, but not sure if enabled. But yeah, those are also interesting things if you will be managing the system. Yep. Okay. So that's what I wanted to.
We have a question in the chat, maybe to Raphael. Why you didn't include Jems on the Docker Composer? Why is not Jems also booting? That was the question.
Well, we mainly created the Docker Compose for our purposes, as we didn't know whoever will even be using Dockerized setups, and for us it's best the way it is, because we started from within IntelliJ. We run the server, we debug the server. It wouldn't make much sense to also have the server in there. But I mean, everybody's free to do whatever they want with their Docker Compose file or with their server setup. So I mean, it might have some advantages to have basically the Gem server defined as a service and running as a service on a Ubuntu machine. But aside from that, I think it wouldn't be a problem to also trigger the Spring Boot in there.
In case you will be building from sources, there is also a Docker file, which is then I'm capable of creating a containerized way, I think, for running in Docker. But we are not using it right now, or not here.
All right.
All right. What's next, or what we want to show?
So I think next or in between would be interesting to kind of have it as a service, like I mentioned. Maybe, I don't know. I think Jose, you put it on the schedule.
Yeah, I think I would ask so. Yeah, maybe we can. I would say that now we would run Jems with a bit of console, you know, some parameters, and so that people see how they set up, like you know, let's say the plugins, for instance, you know. Let's install plugins as well, because so far we just extract the zip file and we took the jar file and rerun it. But another step that people will do for sure is that they will put the plugins also working. So maybe it's a good example how to use the console.
I mean, yeah, we can also do that, but
and then we
sorry?
will make a service. And after that, Jems as the wolf command line, we will make a service.
Yeah.
So that you know what I mean by service. So if the server is rebooted, automatically Jems comes.
Yeah, I think it's quite practical to have Jems in there. I mean, depending on your system. So for example, on an Ubuntu as a systemd service, because then you have the commands in there, you will have the parameters in there. You will basically know that it works if you restart it. You don't have to rely on a single line that you basically enter or some other script. So yeah.
Okay, but
the question is if you want to continue with that, or should I basically show that?
I can continue if you will guide me, or if it's better to do it under your hands, then you can just take over.
I mean,
my recommendation is that we have now Jems working, running, but let's give an example of the plugins. How our plugins can work, you know, through the command line. We have this path that we pass where the plugins are, things like that. Because I think it's important that we give an example how to use the command line for Jems. Is it okay, Andre?
Yeah.
So let's start by copying the plugins to your local machine, I believe.
Okay.
So on the package, we have this folder called add-ons, which contains the standard plugins, and they are already compiled. All we need.
You want me to copy?
Yeah.
Add-ons / Jems standard plugin. Yeah, this way. Okay. Okay, now I have it.
Yeah, so maybe you want to put the plugin in a separate folder because you have to pass the path. So you can.
So you mean Java -jar?
Maybe create a folder just for that jar file of the plugin.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say plugins. Yeah, just copy move the, yes. Okay, good. Now, just the plugins, yes. Now, if we go to the manual.
I think I messed it up.
No, I think it's good.
Okay, yeah, it's fine.
So now if we go to our manual, we can see, go to our web page, we consult all this command line, and we look for the plugins. Okay, not, I think it's one of the first ones. Go down, down, down. Hold on. Here. So one of the parameters is the add-ons. Add-ons means plugins for us. So the recommended value, it's like we pass this loader path to exactly say where are the plugins located. So now when Andre is going to run Jems, you will put this parameter and specifically saying that our plugins are in this folder. So when Jems server boots, you will look for all plugins and automatically detect. By the way, there's a lot of plugins inside of this jar, like the pre-check plugin, the application form export, the data export as well on the program level, and everything is detected on the fly. Of course, if you have customized plugins, you would also want to put on this path, on the plugins path, so that it will also get detected by Jems in the boot. In EMS, it was possible to detect the plugins without reboot, but that does not happen in Jems. If you do change to the plugins and you want them to run in Jems, you need to reboot Jems. So, okay, is it the correct path, Andre? I don't think so.
Yeah, like this? Yeah,
I believe so. I don't know. Can you? I think so. So what we saw is passing one of the parameters, but there are so many. We cannot do it all parameters today, but you know, some parameters are related with the configuration of the mail server, other parameters. I mean, you have to check the manual page, of course. There are a lot of parameters so that you, based on the parameters, you pretty much configure the gems. I think plugins are very important. So that's why we are doing this one as example. And now if we go to Jems, we will be able to see the detected plugins. By the way, I think you should know it's also in the documentation. Jems comes with the administration, you know, this user created. There's the default password. Most likely is the first thing you should do is change the password. But those things are not very technical. They are a bit out of scope for our presentation. Yeah, so when you go to calls or so, you should be able to create a call, yeah. So we have to put something there so that we are able to create something, a call. So what we are doing is that we will demonstrate that hopefully our gems will be able to detect our pre-checked plugin.
Yeah, but it's not loaded.
It looks like it didn't detect. So that means we run gems, possibly with the wrong path, I believe. Can you do PWD? Okay, can you show now the gems? It's not on gems, it's on over. Yeah, that was the wrong path. Yeah, this demonstrates, you know, like I said, a lot of the tickets I got was that the plugins were not detected, blah, blah, blah. And it's usually about the command line. You have to double check the path, or I don't know. It's the typical ticket I get. Usually not the IT providers are asking, but there are programs, you know, on the user level. They are asking the plugins are not working, blah, 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 and it looks like they were not detected. So let's see now. Yeah, maybe an interesting topic is about the logs. I'm gonna write it here for the question and answers.
Still no.
Yes. Okay, so we have a live troubleshooting now. So let me see. Can you double check the path? Is it okay, the path? If not, maybe it's about the right, the file privilege on the jar of the plugin jar. Just give, actually they should, but yeah. By the way, Andre, is any possible to have some, do we have feedback about the plugin detection in this log? Or, I mean, Raphael or Andre?
Yeah, it will be there that it was loaded, but it's just scrolled.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, I missed the command. Can you just quickly tell me what you typed in? Because that's what I wanted to mention, and I mentioned it at the beginning. Here it's all about the properties basically, and you have to be careful where you state your property in what way. So before the jar, for the Java command, you have to use the -d, and afterwards you use --. Yeah, sorry, I missed it. Sorry,
Yes,
my fault.
yes.
So always be careful there if you state it as a VM parameter or as a application parameter. So that's quite important. So just know that before the jar, it should be -d. Afterwards, it should be --. But that's Java basics. It's just so annoying if you do setups because you always miss that stuff. And I had people searching for errors just because they missed one letter usually. And like all those Spring properties. If you're used to agile development, you're easy to write sprint instead of Spring. One typo, it won't work. So that's the disadvantage. That's why we've come a long way to kind of use the Dockerized and use the things in services so that everything basically can stay set up and configured. So now it will work, of course. So.
Maybe you can refresh the
I think it's because you need the add-ons before the jar. That's how we have it with one dash. So first the add-ons and then the jar.
That's true, actually. It could be here. We need it for the Spring context to be loaded, actually. So you need it before, actually. It's not the application parameter, I think. So that's why you kind of have to put it before.
Yes.
So again, my bad. Best just put them all before with -d. Then
You can use environment variables.
or use environment variable. But see, that's what I mean, basically. You can be, I don't know, totally into that and just do that all day long. You still make those mistakes because it's just so easy to miss those things. But yeah, sorry for that.
Yeah, this is actually, like I was saying, there are a lot of tickets about this, and we just got into it. We completely understand our stakeholders here. It's a very easy thing to
It's there.
Yeah. All right, good. Actually, Amond was asking in the chat, what happens if there are several plugin jars in that folder? I believe it's not a problem to have different jars, right? Because we pass the path.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it was thought about. So you're free to use as many jars as you want. Well, let me backtrack on that. Just, well, don't use more that you need. But yeah, you can put multiple plugins in one jar. You can have a jar for each plugin. The main important thing is if you have the same name and version in there, or type and name, then it will just use the last one. So basically the Spring context will overload it, basically. So if you have the same one deployed twice, it will just take the last one that it loads. So yeah, it's pretty much not nice to know then what's the problem. So basically just make sure that you only have each plugin actually there once.
Yeah, I think you will also cover that in the after lunch when you're going for customization of plugins where you specify the name type. Yeah, you can mention that. So I think for now we are pretty much done with the, we have Jems running. We put the plugins working. Of course, there are a lot of things we could do more regarding the command line, as you saw in the manual. We have all this customization, but I'm not sure if it's worth it to go through because, every program is different. There's all kind of different customizations. If you want to activate help desk email, things like that. Maybe you can share again the manual, Andre. So exactly the same page you were with all this command line. Yeah, if you scroll down a bit. So yeah, so you see all these parameters are also passed on this command line, but I don't think it makes much sense that we go to show here. Yeah.
Some I thought I can quickly cover if we set it up as a systemd service, for example. So if you want, I can.
Yeah, maybe we can jump onto that with some parameters as example as well, or only the
anything else you wanted to note down, Andre or Jose?
No, feel free to.
Or any pressing question in between. So the essence is it's pretty much very easy nowadays to just run a Spring Boot application or to have your database containers pop up as long as you use something of or some form of Docker container, just because it makes the configuration so much easier. All right, if no question, I can try. I mean, I tried in the meantime. I tried to go a bit into detail. Maybe let me just mention a few things. Let me just check that I can share that screen. Yeah, I think it started. Which screen was it? This screen. So you should be able to see some terminal, and they already have it running. So basically, just to shortly introduce. So here we have what was the command? We have also a pretty fresh VM. I don't know, Jose, if there is anything important to mention for it. LSB release, right? That's what it was, release -a. So we see, whoops, typo. So we see here it's an Ubuntu 22 long-time support, and yeah, it's just basically also a really fresh VM from yesterday. But I prepared some stuff, so basically that we can also quickly show that or get into that. So for example, I created here in var lib a MariaDB folder, which I wanted to use for the main volume. But we'll see then if that worked really. If there is nothing in there, maybe it didn't work. But anyway, so we have here in home just a server which I built yesterday. So I've just forgot about some local changes, and that way it's at the same time a good example. So I also have a Docker Compose YML file there, which we can quickly have a look at. So basically in here we see I've set up the Jems database, MinIO, audit database, so Elasticsearch, and the Mailhog, because I thought, why not quickly show it? If you have test systems, it's so easy or so nice to have that also running, because you don't have to spam some existing mail server or so. And yeah, the rest pretty much standard, except that I changed the database name here because I have it locally differently. And I tried to set up that volume here, but I think that didn't work, maybe because I started before differently. But in essence, that's the Docker Compose file. Yeah, Wim. Always know how to use it. So I already booted it up, I think. I just used a different tab, so we still have it running here. I can show you here the Docker PS. So we see that we have the MariaDB running, MinIO, Mailhog, and Elastic. And the nice thing here is you also see which ports are located where. So like that, I can, for example, easily say, I mean, it makes sense later on maybe, but why not quickly show you? For that, we have to know that this system should have, well, I know the IP, so I don't have to install. So should be this one. And what did we say? We have Mailhog running 1025. if you don't set up anything differently, it should also be possible to access those quite directly. Or is it routed for 8025? 8025 it was. So here you see that Mailhawk test email server that you can then basically configure for Jems to use. I don't know if you know it already. It's not that interesting. It's just fun because it's also has some features like some you can set if some email should fail and so on. A bit of a percentage and a bit of a testing capabilities that it has. All right. Anyway, so what I wanted to show is actually that in CT etc system D, you can easily set Jems to run as a service with, what did I use? Jems service. So we vim quickly Jems service. And we see here, I've already used quite some parameters. So I've used the working directory, the opt-prod, which I created, but yeah, could be anything you want. I've said that it should restart on failure. So also be careful there, because if you have some parameters set up wrong, it will just restart all the time. And yeah, as for the command itself, so I've set the path, which I now realize is wrong for the plugins, but I can easily modify it because I don't have the directory yet. We have that management info enabled so that we also get that endpoint. We have the data source set to the one I have adapted in the Docker. So as you might know, it's Jems DB, I think, now as default. We have Elasticsearch, and here the advantage is now I can set up to everything basically to localhost or 127.0.0.1 because it's running local in the Dockerized environment. Then we have the MinIO. We have the mail notification enabled, as I can show you here, that it's basically just using some dummy mails, and the actual mail host should be then also localhost so that it can make use of that Mailhawk basically. We have that port that was specified there. We have the mail username that's used in those templates that we can also set up later on. We have some more properties that will show up as in that info area. And yeah, I tried to kind of set the Spring port to 80 because by default you will rather than call it on 8080. And that's basically it. So advantage here is you can write all that once and basically have that running as a service and have it starting up as the server. I don't know if somebody cleaning was kind of hitting the switch and the server had to reboot or anything else happened, it will just restart the server like this because we can set that service to start on server start. All right. I think
maybe Rafael, you can just give an example of it. How to run the service then.
Yeah, I will. I just need to write quit in Vim, but focus on the right one. So did I change now anything? Let's quickly. So yeah, port 80. So now basically, I don't know, did I start it? Let's quickly check. We have the.
You have to reload the service.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to know if it's already started, so we can call systemctl status, and we see that it's active and running. So I'll quickly reload the, yeah, that's the disadvantage. If you have it in the systemd configuration, you have to always make sure that you reload it if you make changes. Reload. So systemctl daemon reload. And then I can just restart the Jems service. I think that should be there. So it should now show that it's starting. And yeah, it shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, I think it's now running.
We can check the status again. We see that it's starting. It's using port 80, so I think that worked. And I think we can now, I could have shown you that it wouldn't have worked in a second before. Or yeah, you see now that it doesn't work, but as soon as the Spring context is loaded fully, it should be here. You can also use what it's called journal CTL. It's always those different commands. I think it's journal CTL-U, right? Stop that reverse search. Jems service. So here we see that it failed a lot of times yesterday because I tried some things. But the status now should be that it's up. Yeah, started. So 57 seconds. So it did need a bit. And now we should be able to connect to it. Not with HTTPS, I think, because no one enabled. All right, so we see that it's here. This is pretty much the base installation, but we should already see that the accessibility statement leads to that example.net. So you see it in the bottom corner. Of course, that is not there, but since I added those in the parameters, you see that kind of popping up here. Otherwise, I think we don't display them at all. Aside from that,
there's a question in the chat that I think is interesting to answer at this context. You know, it's about service. So Amund says, if the server restarts, it's also important to make sure the Docker containers are also restart on the reboot.
Yeah, of course. So you also have to make sure of that. But I think there's also a command to just run them on startup, right? But I have to say that I'm not 100% sure what the command was for the Docker Compose. Thing is, I rarely do that locally. Do you know it, Amund? So was it just a parameter, or was it similar to the service? You would also call the service with enable, I think. But I can look it up over the lunch break and tell you. Docker enable, okay.
So basically the service for Docker should be enabled.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure that's enough for the Docker Compose to be upped, but like I said, I can check or it's easy enough. All right, so basically that quickly showed you that we can easily run that as a service, and you have the advantage then of checking the status, having the parameters there a bit more manageable than just triggering the Java command or so. Also, we saw that the commands or the parameters in general work, and you can modify them basically at will. Anything else? I quickly wanted to show you how nice it is with the, create a new account with that Mailhog basically. Just for fun, we'll quickly create a test, test, because it's fun. And we set up, we did have some rules, right? Test, let's use test. No, we had that one uppercase. Oh man. Why did we change those rules? Digit 2. All right. 5F4M8. And of course we've read it. And yeah, true. We didn't set up the mail templates, so that's why it failed. I have to check that then because I have them somewhere else. But let me quickly backtrack. Is it possible to increase the Docker volumes? How is that to be understood? Should I check the question or will you have a look?
No, this is a question for later in the round. So
okay. I just had it open. That's why I hit it.
I'm not sure if people understood what was the problem here. So Rafael is trying to show you some fake mail server that is for mostly testing purpose.
Yeah, exactly. So for that, it's quite practical and it's quite easy. As you saw, it's also just a Docker container that you just up with the rest basically, and it's easy and straightforward working. The problem is just for now, as this is a really new installation, we don't have anything set up yet, and that's basically what I was just getting into.
Yes,
because you have that step 4, right? A Jems application setup that we didn't do yet.
So Rafael, so the thing here is that you cannot register users until you have Jems properly set up. That means you need to set up the mail server and so on in your console. And I believe Rafael did that, but the other problem you have to do it as well is that if you remember, the Interact Jems release package contains other resources and they are mail templates. And those mail templates need to be installed in the system. Otherwise, you will not be able to register users. Not only register users, but you also need, there are also mail notifications about the forgot password and things like that, and then you have an error. So it's really mandatory that one of the first things you have to do is go to mini.io and upload those templates. I'm not sure if we should do it now because it takes a bit of time, and time is something that we don't have much right now.
Well, we can quickly ask if is somebody interested in it. So theoretically, if we don't know anything, we can basically quickly check that Docker Compose file. There we would have the access data for Min.io. Then we would kind of go to that server, check if we can also access it. But
Rafael, do you have the templates?
That's the next question that I would have asked you if I also find them on the.
Maybe Andre can do that. He has the package downloaded. He has Min.io running. I believe it can show.
If they are there, then Andre, if you are here, you can maybe just upload them.
I'm here.
So is it okay that you show us how to configure Min.io, like loading these
9,000. So theoretically, if you check the Docker Compose, you will find that the port is 9,000 or it forwards to 9,001. And here you can use the access data that we set there, which is pretty much something you should change, but yeah. And whoops, clicked on the pop-up. I know that this is not. yeah. All right, and in here you basically can access your Min.io, and you would have to do the setup basically for Jems in Min.io. And yeah, Andre, if you have the files, you could also access that.
Yeah, I can access it, and the files are in the zip, or?
Yes, correct. And maybe Andre can share the screen. He will show Rafael. I think Andre is in a better position to just do this configuration.
Yeah, if you want.
So Andre, just show us this zip file, the files that we are talking about, and how to access to.
Okay, so I still have it running on that address, just it's different port now, and the files should be here.
If you want, can you do it to the system that I kind of showed? Because then I can continue with the mail sending. Or
yeah, where is that
so
system?
you could 51, 15, 192, 150, and the 9,001.
It's wrong. It's 15 on the second.
Ah, yeah, sorry, 15, not 50.
Okay.
And
here.
it's default, so min.io and min.io 1, 2, 3.
Okay, and
So what you have to know is that that's one of the first things you should do when setting up Jems, basically Jems server. We need to have those buckets defined, and we need, I think, one at least for the project data and one for the general data, right? I have to
but
check.
usually they are created as far as someone uploads the first file.
So it's in the manual, everything, how to set up this mini.io. We need to create buckets. So
It's somewhere here.
maybe you can even use the search. Go on the top upper bar, just put bucket, maybe. Okay, no, that's budget. Okay, it didn't go there. Let's use another. Email templates, that one. Yes. All right, everything is explained here.
So it's called email templates.
Correct.
Looks like.
Yeah, so that's basically it. You just create a bucket for it.
And now we need to upload the files. So in real life, all programs come to this resource. They change the HTML, with their own language or the logo of the program and so on. But we will use the standards coming directly from Interact package. And that's all. You just need to upload and make sure that the names are exactly the same, because Jems will look exactly for these names. Yeah, I think that's it. And now,
yeah, should I quickly take over again?
Yeah, please.
Andre, can you give me the screen? Andre, just release the screen. I'm using Zoom from the browser, so I don't have more rights than. All right. So basically, now you should see somewhere the bucket with that stuff Andre quickly showed you. And we can now do the same again. And hopefully now we don't see any problems. P8, 5P8. So we can check our inbox now, and we had that still open, and it's already here. So that's really how nice it works. So you see it immediately, and you can have a look. Just needed time for loading, and you have basically our default template with that confirmation link. That, of course, here you have to be careful because we set up that link back to Jems as I didn't have the IP yet to just this example net. So you would have to use then the correct link. But I don't know if I should show you. I mean, it's pretty clear then that now. So these are all the defaults. I hope this is still the default. Yes. So now I also have the audit log, like you already saw when Andre demonstrated it. You have the additional user. You have it's being unconfirmed. If I now use that link that was created, basically can show you how to.
You need a 0.
Confirmation.
The last
one
is 0, 150, the IP in the link.
Oh, okay. Not enough. So, yeah, that's a bit a disadvantage because I'm already logged in with the admin, but that shouldn't bother us now too much. So basically it just shows that the email was validated. And if I reload the user list, I see now that the user status is active and would be able to log in with the test user if I would remember still the password. But it was basically just to demonstrate how easy it is really to set up some container here to test, and the email to test in one go the user registration and your templates. Yeah. So that's one part of what you remarked as 4A. So the MinIO setup with buckets. Next would be quickly to show the first steps. So what would be next would be the setup of the actual languages. I don't know, should I cover a bit of system configuration too now, or does everybody know that anyway?
I think on the level of the system, we are fine. It was the only thing that was missing, the MinIO. After that, I mean, there are a lot of things, but you know, it's in the manual, all the options and so on. Maybe we can go very quickly on the user level, application level, and then we have to jump for question and answers because we are a bit tight on time. We also need a break because people might want to go to toilet.
Yeah. No, then I just want to mention three things, I think. One is really don't forget about the composition of the project ID, because that will make then an impact as soon as a project is created, obviously. So if there is a specific abbreviation or so to use, if you want to have the 2-digit call ID as part of it, set it up beforehand. Then very important, the languages, check that as one of the first things, to just basically let the system know which system languages should be used. Those you will find then here in the menu, and which input languages should be used for mainly for the application form. Then everything that is multilingual to be inputted, that is important here. Also, it's really important to just use what you need, as we, I think, have a maximum of 6 or so that you can enable for those input languages. Otherwise, it would just get too crowded. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, the translation files as another step for the setup. I think there is a general source of most of the programs where you shared it. So you should be able to download it also from other programs that already translated some languages. Either way, you always have the possibility to get the default translations, which are the English one provided by us. Then two more.
Because we have a lot of tickets. A quick remark, because we have a lot of tickets about translation. A lot of users come to us that they say that they cannot upload the translation file, and that's very, very likely. 90% of the case were related with the MinIO was not running, or the port was not properly configured, things like that.
Okay.
So as you can imagine, any upload of translation file goes to MinIO, you know, and you can run Jems without even MinIO. So it's good that you are assured that MinIO is running so that you can upload files of translation.
Yeah. The thing is, I'm now not 100% sure if we have to create another bucket for that. So I would also have to consult the log, the manual for that. Do you know, maybe Andre or Jose?
No, I don't think we need.
So I think we still have two possibilities to put stuff in a general folder like we do with the plugins. But of course, it's much easier to manage with MinIO. And of course, if you upload stuff here, it will go to the MinIO container. All right, just two more things to mention. The NUTS database is something you need to set up. So this will, if I click download, download it once from the, what's it called, the Eurostat database. So we see, we see it here anyway. I don't need to show you in the console.
Here we also got some troubles, not many tickets, but there was some programs who could not download NUTS, and it was related with firewall rules. You know, they were not allowing the connection. So it's recommended that you have a rule for the you know, or you don't have limitations, or if you have limitations on the firewall, you have to add a rule for the IP URL of Europa.
Yeah, good point. So we have two external endpoints at the moment that we query. So the one is that NUTS database from that Eurostat location, and the second one is already the next point, the conversion rates, the last one that I wanted to mention. This one will have scheduled automatic. It will have automatically something scheduled that it will trigger the download for each month on the 1st of the month, basically. But of course, as we now set up the system as new, we have now the 6th, we should do it once manually. So yeah, we might not need it now already, but yeah, that's how it's done. And basically now we have it in a system.
So what I recommend, hold on, I'm not sure if you're watching. Yes. So what I recommend, I will put in the chat, is that you allow this domain. So your server should, if you allow Jems to communicate with this domain, this automatically includes not only the nuts, but also the conversion rate access. So just add the rule, and I pretty much, I see europa.eu as a trust URL. Yes, I think we can finish here about this session of installing Jems, because we did pretty much the basics on the command line. We set up mini IO, even a fake mail server for testing. We came to the application level. We did the initial setup. We saw plugins also detected. I think we are in a place where we can start with question and answers around, and then we have a break. So we have questions about, maybe I will start with my own question. Is it because it might be a bit misunderstanding? You were using Ubuntu and the Interact start to recommend CentOS, but the fact is that we changed that. We were not recommending per se CentOS OS, but any Linux distribution with kernel 4. So, you know, it's up to the programs to decide what is the best distro. You know, sometimes it's up to the IT provider, how they feel more comfortable with at the end is all about packet management and things like that. Just a remark. So we also have, yeah, Christoph Eck about this translation, he said that translate create the bucket by itself. So it's not needed to create the buckets in Mini.io, it's confirmed. So questions we have from Mihai, if it's possible to increase Docker volumes. I mean, Andre or Rafael, you want to talk about it? It's about the size of Docker.
I don't fully understand the question. So it's just about the size?
Yes,
or...
so from my understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think Docker per se, on default, it will use the file management system where there's no limit defined per volume, right? It's all automatically. Or there's any default maximum for the data volume by default, you know what I mean?
I have to also check the Docker manual for this. I don't think that it's really a problem, but they are not dynamic, as I know.
Maybe Mia, you can come to the, feel free to unmute yourself and describe a bit more the issue. Is it the default is 1 terabyte the volumes, or?
Yes, problem are for each volume it's 1 terabyte. But I believe it's necessary to increase the Minio volume something 2 or 3 terabytes. And also it's necessary to move Docker to, I don't know, home. Because in var log is not enough space. You actually.
Good points. I mean, you see there we do a lot in development, but a bit less actually running those in production mode. So there are a few parameters Andre mentioned already, and of course the thing that it's always preferable to have it on certain volumes. So especially MariaDB and Minayo, like you mentioned, there the sizes matter. And for MariaDB especially, it's quite nice to have it on a volume to do then backupping and such. But yeah, specific questions, I also have to consult the Docker manuals, which are quite good. So feel free to leave those questions in the chat. I might check them over lunch if it's something specific.
Yes, I mean, this is a bit in general, you know. So Interact commitment is to provide the software, Jems per se. And sometimes it's difficult to understand, you know, every program is different, data centers are different, and all these, the machines, they are different, how they have this different data, you know, the volumes and so on, the data logic. And of course, there's always a bit of responsibility, because don't trust in Interact on recommendations. It must be more that you understand the real, you know, the real scenario of your data center, and that's the purpose of the IT provider, to find out the best fit configuration in your case. Never trust the defaults. That's my general point here. Okay, maybe we can go to another question. That's also Luke asking, it's possible to let Jems create a file with application logs? I'm not sure what means application logs here. Is it on the application level, or you mean, because for application level, we use Elasticsearch. Maybe, Luke, can you unmute yourself and give a bit of more color on this question?
Yes, hi. So in the application or in the audit log are only messages stored which are inserted in the Elasticsearch by the audit events inside the application logic. But I'm talking about the real application logs, so the output of the console, and messages also from logger objects inside the source code.
Yeah, I think we saw Raphael showing journal, which is pretty much the default application, I don't know, that comes for logging. Even though, you know, how I do it in my test environment is that on the service per se, you know, maybe Raphael, can you go to service? Can you edit it?
Yeah, you want me to show the what now?
Log.
The systemd service, or
yes, systemd service for Jems, Jems.service file you were showing.
Yeah, because
then
I can also
there you can also set the log.
Okay, because also the logging libraries are able to create logging files, for example, with a timestamp, so that you have a separated logging file for each day. For example, is something like that also possible, or?
You mean Gem? Okay, you're talking about log rotation. Man, you have to Google a bit. I cannot do it right now. You know, I'm recording, and my limitation to minimize is quite.
But yeah, there I can say it's pretty much the standard settings, so you can easily enable that. So both the log rotation as well as you could also set it up differently. But I don't know if that is not a bit more work. So for example, one of our goals was to have somewhere in the future to kind of also make it easier to have the logs then directly in Elastic, because it would be quite nice and handy to inspect here in the system itself, especially if you have different environments and you don't have necessarily access always to the computers with SSH or something. So it would be nice to also have them somewhere available. But yeah, unfortunately, this was no priority so far.
Okay.
So for now, I can just refer to, I think it's pretty much standard settings. Let me quickly check. There should be, you should be able to find it by.
Yes, you can find there's you know, you just change the service and put where you want to put the log. I'm not sure about the advanced configuration on the log level. I don't remember this.
No, I mean that there is a specific section so that you can just set up a Spring Boot or Spring
Okay.
in this way. You just add those parameters. So for example, logging.level.org Spring or something like, or logging.file where you set your specific file that you want to have. Or I'm pretty sure you can also check the log rotation there. You can give a max size. So it's all, you should be able to find it by checking Spring Boot or even Spring logging.
There is, yeah, I think the question is kind of answered. I hope you have a good meal. Yeah, it's a bit intensive, I would say, but this is what I believe you expect from this event. It's a lot of sharing of the screen and a lot of technicalities. And it will continue as well for the second part of it. It will be all about plugins. So we will have 2 sessions. The first one is about the pre-check plugin. You know, this is the plugin that checks all the rules when an application form is submitted. Interact comes with a standard plugin. And what are we going to do on this session is show how to customize maybe some dummy rule. I mean, Raphael will guide us there. And after that, we will also have a customization of another plugin. It's the program.export plugin. It's just a plugin that has access to some information in the Jems system, and it could be quite useful. And I believe some programs will request some change there. If you notice, you already understood in the beginning that all these plugins are inside of the same jar. It's this Jems standard plugin jar, but you can customize and create separated jars and reboot Jems, and Jems should be able to detect, but more details are given now with Raphael. So Raphael, I give you the 4 for the first session, pre-check plugin customization. Go for it.
All right, so I hope I'm not sounding too chaotic. So shout out if anything is kind of weird or if you don't understand anything.
Yeah, we keep the same
specific things. Not if you don't understand anything, that's kind of a problem, but no.
Let me say, we keep the same format where as soon as you have questions, just drop in the chat and I kind of moderate for you, Raphael. If not, always after the session, we have opportunity, we have a question and answers times where we can address them there. Yeah, come on.
All right, so I will quickly try to kind of get a bit of a structure in this. So I will share my screen. So for one, and I will first, so we will now have the opportunity to see the full checkout and build process. I hope so. I hope I'm not telling you too much. So what we have now is I wanted to have that cleaned up a bit. So I will have a new folder that I will use for the Jems standard plugin. So, and
maybe I would recommend you to explain a bit this architectural thing. What is this Jems contract plugin is, you know, how does this thing work?
Okay, so while I'm doing that, I'm trying to give you a bit of a background information. So in general, the architecture is like that we have on one side the Jems server, and we will load on startup. So basically, Spring is doing that for us. Anything that is within that path specified for the Spring context to load, basically. And what we basically made use of is this architecture that we kind of have a contract that we agree on. So we have that as an extra package where we basically define what our data provider will look like. that you can access then for the plugin development. So in an essence, we are basically providing a contract that you will basically have a dependency on in the plugins you develop, and that you can just use. So like a, I don't know, API or so. And the contract basically would also be a dependency for the Jems server, which will itself be solving the actual implementation of it. So by that, you kind of, or we make sure that we still have kind of a saying of what should be there, which data structures also we offer. We can update them more easily, and you yourselves, if you develop or if you have people developing on plugins, can have the security that all those things will still work, as you will rely on an older contract. But you can still update accordingly, have new versions of the contract, and use the new functionality. If we wouldn't have that situation, so maybe that just as a side note, in theory, you could use within the plugins anything you want. You have access to the full Spring context. So theoretically, you can also inject services that we use, or I don't know, persistent stuff, but it's not advised because you would run into problems then when updating. So whenever we change stuff, you wouldn't, it will be much more work. So this is basically the compromise, that we still define what's available for the plugins to be used, and we basically define how that is implemented on Jems server side. So this is a nice way to do that and to still allow for certain overrides, and yeah, to basically make that all compatible in the future. And for that to understand now, so we have, when I talk about that, we have what I'm sharing right now, this kind of repository for the Jems standard plugin. And that's a good base because that's something we develop. It will be basically using the contract, relying on the Jems server to basically have implemented that functionality in there. But of course, you're free to modify that accordingly, or to have your own Jems, I don't know, program-specific plugin. And like I mentioned before, you are also free to basically have multiple of these jars, have there inside different plugins, or have all of them in one, basically. That's up to you. And yeah, so the thing is, the contract, you basically, you don't have to care about it. It will just be another dependency that you're basically using. That just aside, because you will find it also here as an extra repository, I think. But ideally, you wouldn't need to modify anything. Just be advised that there is a different version. So the contract doesn't change as often as the plugins, for example, or later in the future, it might change more often. So the goal now would be for us to basically do similar to what I did before with the Jems server, to clone the Jems standard plugin repository, to build it locally, or to first adapt it, then to build it locally, and then throw it on our server that we are using the same like before, and see that both are basically there. I did not figure out what's wrong with the build, but as we are here rather on backend part of the whole architecture, it shouldn't matter that the front-end build here was failing, or that there were some npm problems. We wouldn't necessarily need that. So I assume it will be fine, but fingers crossed. So I would start now by cloning, but yeah, be sure to shout out if you have any questions so far. Just quickly moved it so that I have the folder in there for myself. So input it, cancel my font. So basically, I'm trying to have the server from before still in there, but I will clone now quickly that. So we'll just have to know that it's inside a subdirectory. So we'll actually need that. And we'll do in the command line, not on the server, but rather here we check into Jems. There I now moved it. So we have here the Jems for the Jems server. And I will now use that clone command. So git clone, always you have to have set up git, and you have to either your credentials specified or your keys set up accordingly. And I will clone HTTPS. Being always better. And then we have the path if I put correctly. And yeah, it should use the standard directory. I hope it creates that Jems standard plugin directly now in our path. I need that user now. Can I copy? That with a big J should be, I don't know if it's case sensitive.
The username is not.
Okay, all good to know. See if I made a typo. I did not, and that's it basically. So it's quite fast. There is not much in there. It's much slower if you have that from the Jems server. Yeah, of course we've created the Jems standard plugin repository or folder now. Standard plugins, and this now should be up to date. So it's in sync with master. Here, the note basically, we will make releases whenever there is a change. So there is no need here to have a different develop and a master branch, as a release basically of Jems server will be made with a specific plugins version. So here we do not differentiate between branches, just as a side note. So here in the master, there will be the last version that's there. All right, since I have that, I can open that now in IntelliJ. So inside here, no. That didn't update actually. So inside here we have the Jems standard. Actually, that refresh didn't well for the IntelliJ, but let's just do it in the new window. So here, just this project, we have now our source code for, needs to quickly sync with the Gradle. The indexing always takes some time for IntelliJ, but while that is going on, we might as well, not on the server, but on our repository, already call what we did before basically. So we'll also clean build. So we will use that command. In here, we don't have any database tests, so I don't care so much about the skipping the test. What we see here already, that's a specific Kotlin version that has that problem. We might need to specify that. Why is this a problem? Okay, it did not set up that correctly. It should be working. So maybe just as a side note, if you see such two lowercase or so, of course, there are sometimes changes within the versions, and yeah, it's just important that you build with at least Java 11, I think we said. So while this is indexing, what did I say? I'm quickly showing you if I can build. So git status will still show that nothing else was going on here. And I'm quickly calling the clean build command. I don't care about it. Testing flag here, as there are just a few unit tests that should be fast enough. Let's hope we don't disturb IntelliJ too much in the background. Permission denied. Okay, so it seems like the grel w file was created with the wrong permissions. I don't know.
Yeah.
So now we can execute it. And is a fan of the command line for such simple things. Oh no, failed. It did fail with the wrong Java version, which is kind of weird. Andre, are you here actually? Do you know, didn't we update the Jems standards plugin to the last version here? Let's try to build from within IntelliJ. Don't you know, didn't we update that so that it should work out of the box? So why does it shout out about the two lowercase? So that's the wrong Java version or not?
No, actually, I've never had that one. So, but I can try it.
That shouldn't fail. So we're also making a clean build here. The standard plugin. Clean build is the tasks that we'll use, and those as environment variables. And basically, that's basically the first step, so that we see, okay, what we checked out is building. We don't have a problem with any environment specifics like what we would be having now. Why is this not taking the right version? Let me quickly check. Maybe it's Kotlin. What is the problem? Where is the property? Project settings. Kotlin SDK. Is the problem that the 0.8 is still in there from my previous configuration? But it should take the project settings, right? Why is that the problem? It should take the project SDK.
So this is.
Let's quickly try again.
Can you maybe change to lowercase that function call?
Well,
maybe it's faster, or I think if you can fix to your version. Okay, it's 3 cases.
No. This shouldn't matter. That's a different file. We don't have that in the code actually.
This is only called on the CloudFlight Gradle plan.
Sorry? No. This is basically just a template. It's the HTML. I'm pretty sure this doesn't check for that. Why is the problem?
If you start the build, the first line or something will tell you which Java you are using and which versions are applied. So if you check the log, it should. We do not have the full log.
Should I do it with the debug?
No, it's just Gradle, clean build, and or use terminal.
Yeah, but I did So this was
Yeah,
the
but
output.
Maybe you can put the info or debug option to give more data.
Yeah. Where was that debug for debug all? Wasn't this just a setting? I rarely used it, or as argument. Debug equals true, or what was that?
Yeah, it's minus minus debug. Okay, this is too much. But
Well,
if you scroll to the top, okay, that's strange. Can you try it once again in the terminal? That's just
yeah.
right. You just no,
Maybe
just
if
remove these first two. So if you do this, you will not get the info.
clean build or with
Yeah,
info or with
no,
debug?
just like this. Okay.
can you put info? I think it's info. Debug is too much.
Ah.
Yeah, but that's the problem that you are now facing is with Gradle and not with Java. Because the problem is in build Gradle file, is not in code.
No, that's what I.
I didn't check that. That's true. Let me quickly check the Gradle settings. That's a Kotlin version.
Or if needed, I will then share.
.4.4. That's a bit old. Why is that?
Yeah, that's quite old.
Why is it using that one? Okay, I'll quickly stop my share. Check it locally. I don't know, Andre. Maybe you have it from a working one, and you
Yeah, I
can
did
just
it.
read.
Yeah, so here I just run the Gradle V clean build, and it's successful. Yep, and this is Gradle version, and this is the setup that I have locally. But changes you do in IntelliJ will not be making any changes in the terminal itself. So on terminal, it should simply work because everything is covered by this Gradle V command.
Yeah, but like you saw, I'm using having an old Gradle version installed. The question is why it's also not working in IntelliJ. Do you know where I set that version in IntelliJ? I never had to adapt the Gradle version.
Because this Gradle script will take care of it. You usually do not set Gradle version manually. Everything is done by the Gradle itself. So that's why it should work from terminal. You might adjust it in IntelliJ, but from terminal it should work and download the correct version if it's needed.
So okay, so this Gradle script it even updates the package. It should be able
yeah, if needed. Yeah.
Well,
I'll quickly locally update Gradle.
But I don't think this is a Rafael. We don't need particularly to do that. Maybe you can just work on your normal development environment, because the session here is more about the code itself of the plugins, not how to push it.
True, but I need to change then quite a few things, build it and deploy it. I don't know if it makes such a big change. Let me just quickly. Sorry for that.
Yeah, at the same time, it's interesting that we pass through all these issues, because this is most likely what other people will go through.
No, usually it's not. It's just if you're working on an older machine, you usually have your stuff set up from, I don't know, from way before. And if you're not careful and then not using the parameters that you usually do, it's quite easy to then run into such problems.
Yeah, but it can happen. So it's good that we tackle them. Yeah, but we had higher expectation about this script Gradle.
Just updating my indexes. Come on. Any questions up ahead, or maybe just who did already adapt a plugin or create one and run it? Were there any questions coming up, or is basically everybody that's joined here still on the green field, not having done that before?
Not in the chat so far, no questions from the chat. But yeah, true. If you have any questions in the meantime that we are taking care of it, we could already answer something related with the plugins. So, okay, it looks like there's Tadej wants to make a question.
Sure,
Yes,
please.
hello everybody. I have only one question. In the plugins, there are also some default plugins inside the system or not?
So you want me to, so basically it's like this. So Jems release package, you will find that you'll find a jar file that contains a lot of plugins inside. So you can see a jar as a zip file, basically, right? It's encapsulated, and then there inside of that jar you have a lot of plugins. Of course, you can develop your plugins and be all together with the standard plugins. Like if you remember in the call settings, you have a drop down where you select the plugins you want, because when
These are done then in the core settings. To choose the plugins that are in the system, you have to do it in the core settings.
No, this is particularly for the pre-check plugin. Yeah. So when Jems boots, you will go for this folder we saw in the morning that you specified as command line, and it will try to interpret all possible plugins. So it's trying to detect all plugins, So instead of a jar, you might have a lot of them. You can have multiple jars. So at the end, it will detect all plugins, and they will be shown on this drop down in pre-check plugins. For other cases as well, for program.export, it will also detect the plugins, and it should display there. There are specific things about the application form export. So far, we don't have this model where you can create new types, but this is not addressed here. So far we don't, on the level of application form, you can, of course, customize the plugin, how do you want this export, but to create new plugins, it's a functionality that we still don't have.
Okay.
New plugins. So, yeah.
Some of them we have to write on our own, possibly. To create some plugins for our own, if we want to have other things at plugins or not.
I didn't, to create this again?
To create plugins, if we want if we want more, then it's in the system. We have to create then plugins for, I don't know, for our needs itself.
Yes. Yes, sure. If you want to create new plugins, yeah, you can just leave the jar, the standard jar file there. It's okay. But then you create a new plugin, your own jar file, and make sure that you select them in the settings of Jems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for this.
No problem. So in the meantime, Rafael is trying to figure it out what is going on with this Gradle, or actually this function call. Looks like this is, so let me see if I understood it correctly. This is about the compiler or what? Because this function does not find in Gradle, so they have, Rafael, can you give a bit of more?
Yeah, no, my problem is that I locally have an old Gradle version installed that it seems to be taking, and that's not working. So I'm kind of a bit curious why it shouldn't work from IntelliJ at least, but then again, it should just take the Gradle version that basically the plugin defines, right? So I'm a bit confused myself why it shouldn't work out of the box.
Yeah, is it a big effort if you do your development environment, Rafael?
Yeah, I'll quickly try to switch.
You know, because this troubleshooting sometimes takes a bit of time.
Yeah, I know. Just have to be careful about different names.
Yeah,
right.
Make sure you don't push 2 hours Jems.
No, I don't do that.
Even if you do, we can undo.
But even there, I see changes. So we updated that recently, or did we? So I'm kind of curious if that build will work then. But I can check that easily.
You check it out from master, right?
I can share actually. Well, I have my local version, and I can show you here. Actually, so you should be able to see that's now my development version, and you see here that it's building, and it is building with the correct or with the later Gradle version. Why it also will be successful, and that's how it's supposed to work. So I'm kind of a bit uncertain why it didn't with the things that we just checked out and cloned. So assuming that the local versions are correct, but then again, it should choose that automatically with the plugin, right? Andre, that's what you said also, right? That's also what I kept in my
great.
back of my mind. That's kind of odd. All right, but what Jose mentioned before, I can show you on the fly. Well, that is still running. You mentioned here we have the system still running, and what I mentioned is that although I don't have any thing in the plugin folder, so plugin is still empty. I did pack it within the Jems server jar, and that's also basically to highlight the fact that it really doesn't matter where it is as long as it's in the same path for the JVM. It will also check that and basically handle that on the Spring context initialization. So since we have one version of well, it's a bit of an older version that is in there of our standard plugins, you are able to find it then in the browser. Where do I have it? So that's also a nice way to check it. We can use our API. Was there another?
I think it's dash UI.
Ah, yeah. Sorry. So that's our generated API. And in here, I could basically recheck what plugins it loaded if I missed it on the server startup with our plugin controller. Just use a get of basically, here we see the available types. So currently you would have, or you could filter for the specific type. So we have pre-submission check as type, program data export, budget export, and application form export. That's the PDF one. Or all if you want to filter for all. I think that's the default, so I can try it out. Yeah, all.
You need to authenticate. Oh, you are ready. Authenticate.
Ah, no, you're right. I need to authenticate. Otherwise, I'll get an authentication error. Do that. Since we're now authenticated, I can execute it. And now you basically get the list of the type. So we have not only one pre-submission check, but we have two predefined ones additionally. One is that blocked, so that we basically would block any submission if we use that in the call setup. One is the no check, so that basically any pre-submission check would go through. And then we have basically the default one that we provide. And here we can see the key, how it's basically defined and the version that we have in there. So that's not our latest, but basically what I deployed with the Jems server jar. So that's a good way to recheck what it basically automatically detected on server startup. And we can see, so we have these three pre-submission check plugins. We have the application form export in what version, budget export, and program data export actually twice, because we have one for the partner data export and one for the project data export. And here you can already see how that works. Basically, you put there a different key, ideally also a different name, but it will kind of load them additionally in there if it realizes you put them in the relevant class path. So that's all there is to it. The build was successful. So the question is, should we adapt something? So we could say now, you wanted this session to be about the pre-check plugin, right? So we could say now, or maybe quickly to the structure, we could also throw out other plugins here, budget export, or the application form export if it's just about the pre-condition check plugin, but it wouldn't matter as they will have the same version. I think this is pretty much what I used in the creation of the Jems server. So what I can do now is I can say in this default impl, there should be our name and our version. So I can say we'll create for this workshop. Where do I have the workshop file? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What did you note down? What should we adapt? Any questions? Anything that you want to know or have answered? Otherwise, we'll name it.
It's okay. So first of all, we just put workshop. So this is one of the first things we have to do when we are creating a new plugin. We have to give a name to the plugin and to make sure that the type as well and the key is different from other plugins. You know, like I said some time ago, that when we boot Jems starts and it goes through this folder looking for all plugins. And it's good that you don't have conflict of names of plugins, not the name of the file of the plugin, but I'm talking about this key. Keys must be different so that the Jems detects all different plugins. And also the name, it's good that you name for a proper name because the user will need, the drop-down shows the name of the plugin. So this is the first thing we do, right? So after that, we can just go and customize, I would say, a kind of dummy rule, maybe just a check of number of partners. So let's make the plugin to fail if the number of partners is smaller than 3. Can we check the rules right now?
Yeah, sure. So we have basically divided them into different sections. So partner section should be B, if I'm now hopefully not mistaken. So we have already quite some checks in there. So what do we want? We want to check only.
So another detail that is interesting, if you see in the code, we also have about SPF. Okay, so that means the SPF plugin is also part of the same, it's within the same code. So we don't have a separate SPF plugin. We have the standard plugin, which also contains code regarding SPF. Okay, we have some question. I think it's from Guntis. Version there is informative. Oh yeah, true. Coming back to the, yes, this is.
So that's theoretically correct. At the moment, it's more informative, but you should kind of try to keep that in mind because it really makes life easier to know if something was deployed or not, because you will have the same name there. And if you don't update the version, you will just assume that it's the new version, but you basically have to test it. So that's also why I triggered the build in the background to already maybe show you while we adapt something that it basically now created in the default plugin. Never mind the name, that was still from earlier on a different name. So it built for me the Jems standard plugin in a snapshot. I don't have to care much about the name. It just has to be different than what I have in there. But since I actually don't have anything in there, it shouldn't matter. It's just an interesting that and that I don't have to type so much. So I'll quickly just rename it plugin jar. And then we would do something like, oh, not the cloning, didn't I have that open somewhere? Because we would also do later on the same. That is the copying. So something like SCP. What is my folder now?
Are you going to deploy now that changes?
I would quickly do that just to demonstrate that it's basically loading that, and while it's restarting also we can make those changes. But if you say it's not worth it, we can also
we
not
can
do it. I mean,
yeah, let's continue.
Sorry?
At the end, we will try then.
Okay, but we would need to do it anyway. So then it would be just a re-triggering of the same commands. But all right, basically you see here in the main precondition check default impl that it's basically an implementation of our precondition check plugin. That it basically has this project data provider and the call data provider, because both of those providers basically we use to fetch some data. So the call, for example, to know then later on if it's an SPF call and to react on that. And yeah, this is basically the check is here the main method that will be called, and the only thing it will kind of get from the server is the project ID. So what is done here via the data provider, it gets all the data for the call, it gets specific data, and then basically the rest is just checking different values on that and producing a precondition check result with any necessary messages that it basically should offer, and the actual result if the submission with that is basically allowed. And that just checks that no messages are there with type error. So what we can do is we can remove some if we really want, or we can just modify. So what Jose mentioned before, if we want to now check for, I don't know. The thing is, we have to be careful because, yeah, all of those will be checked, but yeah, at the same time, it shouldn't matter much because we just see the additional output then.
Okay, well, let's do
So,
this. You see this where you have the mouse, it's a function called check if at least one partner is active. Let's create the function which is check if at least 2 partners are active and use that one.
okay. Should we differentiate between SPF for standard call or not at all?
No, we just go for standard call. It's just a titled example of changing the plugin per se.
Okay.
So let's just create a new function. List 2, we can change the function.
Care about that.
Maybe it was better to leave the other one there.
Why?
Yeah, because there we will have already prepared the filter for active and size.
Ah, that's true. True, because there we have only one allowed.
And then in the other one, you can just remove.
And use that. The other one I ignore. Or that's what
I
you
would
use.
omit the when completely, so we do not have to differ between SPF. So just, yeah, exactly.
Right, thanks.
And then change the
and
size.
we would filter to 2. Now we don't have any messages provided for that now, but we can.
Maybe you can hard code, just hard code the message normally for this purpose.
Okay, but we can also quickly add them or not.
But hold on,
Yeah, sure.
The filter says at least, right? It should be bigger, or is it my?
True. We had it for exactly 2, but we can change that.
More than one.
Least 2.
Okay, so we also
Partners.
didn't introduce this message system. So let me, maybe I will do it, Rafael. So the plugins, let's just focus on this pre-check plugin because this session is about the pre-check plugin, but others are quite similar anyway. So the plugin, when it's called, or when you submit an application, we call the plugin, and if certain rule does not pass, a message is shown, right? That gives a bit of guidance to the user what is wrong. And this is the message. You saw this file called plugin message en, and they have English. We support multiple language for this feedback to the user. So if you have gems with different, if your program has different language, you know, I'm talking about system language, you should provide, you have to create different translation files. Basically, this is the translation file of the plugin itself. So yeah, this is done. And now Rafael can explain a bit how the message, I mean, is just showing it, how he used this message key to, so basically it's just adding a message to the, yeah, Rafael, since that you have the.
Yeah, so basically, depending on how you structure that really is up to you, but it always makes sense to have some form of, or how to say, avoid duplication too much, have some constances for those and so on. But what you can do is you just add the keys there, and those, of course, you should then make sure that you also have in your messages defined. The difference here is, well, it's pretty much the same like we use in our main Jems server. It will be used additionally on top of that. So all of those messages, properties files basically will be added to your general context. So everything added here in English will be also there available if the plugin is loaded correctly. But it also means that you have to supply with your plugin all the translations necessary. So if you have additional languages, you also have to take care of them here. You cannot upload that in the main language section that we have in the program setup. So the thing is just, it's easy to adapt. It's just a problem if you now have spontaneously a different rule to make up, because of course we have a different else for the info message. So I also need to add that now, otherwise it will not make sense, because we will see that differently here. So we need now one with active and one with, so what we actually wanted, I mean, it will be enough to demonstrate it, I think. Shout out if you think otherwise, but the only thing we want is basically one for the error that basically says, we already have that differentiation. So one will be error, more to partner. Well, that's not really nicely written, but it shouldn't matter that much. So the one would be the error, at least 2 partners should be active, and one would be the info, more than 2 partner active.
Yeah, so there are 2 types of messaging. One is error. That means if that happens, the plugin does not allow the project submission, does not pass the submission. And an info, it's more about a warning, watch out, and tells the user, watch out, maybe something is wrong. And then the user selects continue to submit or not. So,
right. So
in overall, it's all about customizing the plugin. It's all about to check the code. You have to find out and create the function you want or so, but this is all the codic logic. And when you have the function, you have to also think about the feedback to the user. That means create new keys in these translation files and put the proper message accordingly.
And over all the partners. Question is why there are errors. Did I remove something additionally? Error messages. Did I do something wrong? What are our changes? Did I have a typo somewhere, Andre? Or maybe it just didn't refresh those for the error messages.
No, it looks fine.
Let's quickly try to rebuild. Yeah, just maybe to mention that pre-submission check plugin got a bit crowded as there are so many checks in there. And yeah, since we didn't have that over us all the time, we were not there to use so many more practical methods. So it might not be the best to kind of see programmatical, I don't know, highlights. So there is a lot to improve there. If you write it new, of course, feel free to do so. And I would advise, so otherwise it just gets not really usable. So if you have a problem then with some specific rule, it will just be hard to find out what it is. All right, so the build was successful. So that means we should have that now in our lips. So it kind of overrode what I kind of, if I just.
So maybe before you push it, can you extract that jar to see how it looks like, so that we can see the translation files inside? And
don't need to extract it, but yeah. So we see basically that it's all one big mess, but yeah. So you have
if you scroll all the way down,
some,
hold on. If you scroll all the way down, we can see that all this message, so this is the translation files. It follows the same structure and application system, Jems translation files, just the key value. And the interesting part is that there's one of those that contains no language, which is the default still there, right, Rafael? But basically,
sorry, the D and Hungarian, I think nobody took care of that in our project.
But what I want to say is that the mechanics is the same, and the translation files are then found here in this jar file. So something interesting to say as well is that we have a lot of plugins here, and they are reusing also these translation files.
Yeah, if you have everything in multiple jars, of course, you have to be sure that you only use them once, otherwise you would overwrite them. But yeah, that's why it's always good to have some kind of identifier in them, so that it's basically clear that those will be used in the precondition check plugin.
Yeah, I think the general recommendation from us is that you just you copy the standard interact plugin and you work on that interact plugin, so that you put more logic, the program logic, on this standard plugin, because it's quite complex already. I think it's better than start from the beginning. And also the fact that even though it looks a lot of code there, but the code that is there is pretty much what Interacts find it as the minimum of the rules. So I believe that majority of, at least big chunk of programs, will find all rules in this plugin. They want to still keep them. That's my understanding. So they might want a bit more on top or remove some of them, but should be better to change this plugin than create one, just a brand new one with no rules at all. My recommendation.
I mean, I can say on a general basis is very helpful for any plugins, that when there's something is their plugin possibilities in Jems, that there is like a standard one like this, because at least from my experience in coding it, is that it's much easier for me to modify some core or some structure and then make our own rules to it, and try to make like the plugin from scratch would be a lot more difficult for us. So whenever there is new things you can do with the plugins, it's very appreciated that there is a standard core that we can start from, at least for us.
Thank you, Amon.
Yeah, it was also good for us to actually verify our logic then behind, but I don't know if we will do that for then following plugins. So it might be that we just adapt the contract so that you as programs are able to use that, or your companies that provide you with the changes. But yeah, here it is the way for those existing ones that we also have the reference implementation, so to say. So the command I'm using now is the standard SCP. I will copy that local Jems standard plugin jar and here I use a bit of the host aliases and so on. So this will be the 50-something server that I use in the background. And I will now try to put it directly in the plugin directory as the name that I used in here. So
you have a space.
Let's see.
It's a space.
Sorry, we're clicking. So let's not care too much about those. We'll have the rest pretty much standard, and we'll need to publish it. And
now we apply for it.
We apply for it, exactly. Workshop. That's not good.
You forgot to publish the call. You created but didn't publish. So you go to calls once again. Yes. Oh, it's published.
I did publish.
Yes, that's how
Is
you.
there anything in the setup missing?
Yeah, maybe.
That shouldn't happen.
Funds, did you select funds and so on?
Yeah, but usually you don't need additional things here, right? I don't know if we need any of those settings. The application form configuration should be also possible if we just leave it, right?
Yes,
Pre-submission.
maybe what date did you put there? So this is 07.
Few days in the future.
Can you put
Shouldn't
a
that
year
be
in the
enough?
future? Okay.
So I need to select something else here.
Let's save now the call. Yes, let's try
Save
again.
Okay, weird. All right, so now we have our project application. Let's just enter minimum data here and already see what it's basically telling us.
A lot of things.
A lot of things, and in here we now see the additional added at least 2 partners should be active.
So this is the error.
If we change that now, so we'll have a lead partner. There will be many other errors now, but at least this one should be gone as soon as we have a second one, right?
That's something I don't know. I didn't review the code.
So now we have 2 partners. If we run the checks now, we have to check and edit.
Yes.
Well, it were so that took a bit, but we can see again it works, and usually that there should not be any problems once you have the minor details figured out. So like where to have what properties set up. Sorry for that again. Yeah, shouldn't happen. It was just not possible to test everything on that environment before. But also I admit I'm doing usually mostly development work, so it's just a bit the other side of the story. So it's always a bit different.
All right. Like yeah, things, this is like when things can go wrong, they go wrong. This is crazy. I mean, yeah, you know what? I just because it was very intensive. We didn't even have a break. I would just go for question and answers about these customization plugins, feedback from you, and then we just close the whole event then. So for the ones who still survived,
yeah,
live, I hope you have some hydration in the meantime. Please feel free. This is a moment. Give us some feedback about plugins or so things that you would like, or actually, since that is the end of the meeting, we can also accept any questions as well related with Jems server as well. About this debugging of the plugins, it was an interesting question. I also did the development of plugins for EMS, and yeah, it's a bit time consuming, let's say, when there's no proper way to debug.
I mean, what I can always recommend is if you have like a setup that's already working, like here in the pre-check plugin, and that's what we started actually. There are already some tests for it. So it's always practical to have unit tests because it's the first line of defense, so to say. So it's really easier than if you just add your tests, and if you know it's working or it's not, then it's most likely also working then afterwards.